So here I did a test where I basically just tried to determine if all of this information for Pokemon Showdown Gen 8 randbats was true or untrue. So I basically just loaded a bunch of games. So obviously it wasn't against other players because that would be super annoying for them. So what I did was I just challenged myself with test run games. Um, in two browsers just so I could look at every single Pokemon and determine if these were true. So I did that only for maybe like 20 games or so. So this is incomplete data as of yet, but I was able to learn some things so far. So are there only up to two Mons of the same typing per team? Yeah, I'm like basically over 99% sure that this is true because I saw that on every single team. I think I may have even read that online somewhere as well. So you can even have, I think on one team I had like three dual type mons, and it was funny because they all overlapped each other. I had like a Ninetales Alola, that's Ice Fairy, and then I had Primarina, which is Fairy Water, and then I had Walrein, which is Water Ice. So you can have something like that on a team as well. But again, there wasn't more than two typings there, because in that case I had two waters, two fairies, and two ice types. Um, and so I think that is a pretty good thing about Ranbats is that you can only have up to two Mons of the same type because then you're not like weak to like a sweeper. Like for example, a Jinx may set up one nasty plot, and then if you have three Mons weak to Psychic and then three Mons weak to Ice, then it's pretty much just game over at that point. Because Jinx is pretty fast, it's pretty strong. Let's say just sweeps your entire team after a turn one nasty plot. So basically, your team just won't be as easy to take down if you only have, I suppose, up to two Mons of the same type. Although there are still flaws with that. Um, you could think of other ways of setting it up, like maybe you only have one Mon of the same type per team. That would be that would actually be very interesting because then you would definitely have to be thinking really hard at all times what your opponent has in the back. You have to like even more so than you have to already, because if they reveal any type at all, like let's say an electric type, or let's say a fairy bug, excuse me, like a fire bug type, because that actually exists, like a Volk, then you would know that they have no other bugs on their team and no other fire types on their team. It's not possible at that point. So then you would have to really rack your brain to think every single time you see a Pokemon, of what they could possibly have in the back. So I don't know how much I would like that format or if that format would actually be better. I suppose in one way it still allows the more skillful and knowledgeable player to win, right? Because like that type of player will do even better, I suppose. I'd have to think about it more, but like the knowledgeable player will instantly know, because they probably already have memorized all one or 200 mons, in the game, and then they'll be able to instantly know, okay, I can set up with this one mon because I know that they can't have this other mon in the back. Like let's say they have a Regidrago, and Regidrago loses pretty bad to fairy types, but if you know the opponent doesn't have any fairy types, then Regidrago actually sweeps almost any other team, any Mon in the game, basically. Um, because of course it has the Outrage, Hammer Arm, Fire Fang set on the Dragon Net set. That's always what the set is on that setup set. But Fire Fang is super weak, not even stab, so it doesn't even do anything, even at plus one, plus two to a fairy type like Clefable or whatever. As long as it's not a Zacian, that's gonna be steel typing, so it actually loses to like a Dyna Flare. But if like a Xerneas, a Clefable, like pretty much like any fairy type is gonna be able to deal with Regidrago, um, barring that like what 10% flinch chance on the Fire Fang or whatever, but that's like really small. Um, and then it has Hammer Arm, which is obviously resisted by Fairy, and then Dragon type moves. It has Dragon Maw boosted Outrage, but of course that doesn't affect Fairy typing at all. So if you like remove one Fairy typing from your opponent's team, or even get it weakened, then you just know like automatically at that point that like Regidrago has like a over a 90% chance probably of just like easily sweeping the rest of their team. But maybe that's actually an argument for why it's good to have possibly two mons of the same type to prevent scenarios like that from happening or making them much more unlikely. So you have to be even more a more skilled player, I guess. So if to actually bait out maybe two mons of the same type, and then once you beat two mons of the same type on your opponent's team, then at that point you can actually know what mons they will never have in the back at that point, because you can't have three fairy types, for example. So I don't know. It's kind of I think not many people talk about this point that there's only up to two mons of the same type, because it's kind of hard to take advantage of this information in general. Because again, you have to be like sort of mid game or even late game before you actually even realize that before you actually are able to bait out the information or gather the information that your opponent even has two mons of the same type. Because obviously, turn one, two, three, they might not even switch into their other mon of the same type, until maybe really late in the game, potentially. Just statistically, it's not likely that they'll just go from one like water type into another water type, and they probably wouldn't want to do that anyway in general, because if they have a good matchup, like a good type matchup, they probably don't even want to switch out anyway. In fact, you would probably switch out, and like if you have a good type matchup like turn one, then they probably switch out into their matchup, their other type matchup that beats you. But then you're going to save your other mon of the same type as the first mon you had. You're going to save that like probably until late into the end game, because you know that it beats that very first mon that your opponent initially had in that they swapped out on turn one initially against you. So that's actually probably one reason why you won't even see if your opponent has two types until really late into the game, just in general, like generally speaking. But I think it makes the game a lot more difficult. You can't really predict what your opponent has or doesn't have if, with the current ruling, with the current coding, where you can have up to two mons of the same type. But I do think it is probably a good thing that you can only have up to two mons of the same type, for the initial reason I stated. Because if you have more than that, then you're just going to be weak to your opponent's attacks, basically. And you won't be able to take advantage of resistances and immunities. You won't. It's like the game isn't as strategic at that point, because you can't like defensively swap into mons. You can't really pivot that well at that point. If say there's this one mon that has coverage that is super effective against your entire team, right? Perhaps even with only two moves, even they have like super effective coverage against your entire team. So that's why I think that this is something that makes a lot of sense. Maybe there's an argument for only having one mon of the same type on each team, but maybe at that point, people will also just complain, because it's like because then that just widens the gap of like a new player will just lose, like who doesn't maybe know every mon in the game. They'll probably just lose that much easier to better players who know every single mon in the game. So like if I see that Volk, that bug fire, I know that you won't have any bug, any fire, and I know that like one mon will just set up for free because you don't have like any of its counters, for example. So I kind of agree with that though, because then that just means the more skillful player will win more often. So maybe they could even reduce it to just only one mon of the same type on the team. That might be okay, but they'd have to just test it and see how it goes. And then the next point is only up to three hazard removal moves and three mons with hazards. Yeah, so like hazard removal moves, so that could mean like two spins, one defog, or like three defogs on a team, for example, and then like three mons with hazards. So that's just like I'm not talking about three hazard moves or more than that. I just mean like three mons on a team that can have hazards. So I'm testing if that's true or not. So on one team, I saw one mon with T spike, one mon with spike, and one mon with sticky web. So that was three different mons that all had hazards, but they only had one hazard each, and so that aligns with having only up to three mons with hazards, and it also, I guess, aligns with having only up to three hazards. So maybe I should in fact write that as well, and up to three hazards. But I'm not sure if that's true or not. I feel like there was one game a while ago where maybe I had like rocks and web and spike and T spike. I had like every single hazard, or maybe I was one hazard shy. I can't recall at this point. That's probably like 20,000 games ago or something. And so I see this though on like one of the teams, and then on another one of the teams, I saw one mon with rock, stealth rock, one mon with spike, one mon with T spike. Excuse me, one mon with the spike and the T spike. So basically, that's only two mons. One mon had the rocks, and then one mon actually had two hazards. I'm guessing, like a pincurchin would have the T spike and the spike on the set at the same time. But again, you have less than or up to three mons with the hazards, and again, you have only up to three hazards or three hazard moves on the team. And then I saw one mon with spin and one with defog. I think I saw that twice. On two different teams, there was a mon with spin and a mon with defog on the team, and so that still sticks with having so up to three hazard removal moves and up to three mons with hazard removal and up to three mons with hazards and up to three hazard moves on a team. So yeah, I think that's every single case. And of course, it's up to, because you can even have like zero mons. I've seen that often where you have zero mons with hazard moves and also zero mons with hazard removal, like no defog, no spin, and no hazards on your team at all to set up. That actually happens pretty often. I would say like probably at least 50% of the time you have either no hazards at all or you have no hazard removal at all. Oh, and actually court change. Yeah, I guess that could even count, but I don't know. I guess I'll just jot it down when I see it. Like if I ever see like three defogs plus court change, I'll just note it down. Um, but so far this is all true. And then on the next one, only up to two mons of the same ability. Like even in the last video I did with SM Plays, his YouTube channel. Um, I had two regen mons. I had the Slow King and the Ho-Oh, but in fact, I think that's like one of the most broken cases because Regenerator is one of the best abilities in the game. If anything, maybe they should only let you have like one or two regen mons, and then the other abilities aren't even like that important. Like you could have like two or three mons, like with Intimidate or with other abilities, like with Liquid Ooze or whatever abilities that like don't even matter would be like Liquid Ooze. Intimidate could be better, but it could also not be good. I think that's why regen is so good, is because it's like good on any single team, like in almost any scenario, whereas like every other ability is really limited to whatever type of team you have. It's limited to so many things and like what the actual scenario is and what your opponent's team is. Um, but yeah, so far this seems true. Only up to two mons of the same ability, and only up to two weather changing abilities like hail, sandstorm, and only up to two terrain changing mons like electric terrain, grassy terrain, fairy terrain, misty terrain. So I don't know if this is true though. Only up to two weather changing abilities and two terrain changing mons, because I don't think that's really broken like at all. Unless if you have like the perfect team where it's like all like it's like a perfect sand rush team. Like you have like T-Tar, you have like two sand setup mons, which isn't there only T-Tar, or what else can actually set up the sand besides Rockfall? I don't know, but like let's say you have two, like let's say you have a water team, you have like Politoed and Pelipper, and then you have like all of these like Swift Swim mons and whatnot. Then yeah, that would be like really broken, but that's like super unlikely also at the same time. And I feel like that would be pretty good though, but like still your opponent could just be really good against water, like if they have a bunch of grass types and whatnot. So like again, I feel like Regenerator is like really like one of the few like actually like broken abilities where maybe they should actually limit that. Maybe you only get like one mon with Regenerator on your team even. Um, but I don't think they should really limit like other abilities that I can think of off the top of my head. Like again, like weather abilities, and maybe I just like wrote those down here, weather and terrain, just because I don't think I've seen it come up too often where I have maybe like three different weathermons, but maybe I just have to play more games to actually see if that does or does not occur. But yeah, I don't think it's really broken at all, so maybe I'm wrong, and then yeah, maybe I'll just find like a team eventually where I have like three or four of these like on one team. Um, but yeah, like in the intimidate example, like is that really even good if you have like three mons with intimidate? Like what if your opponent's team is like all like special attackers and also just utility, like spike, like hazard removal, hazard setup, or like stun spore toxic, like that sort of stuff. So it's like you could just be at a big disadvantage even if you have like a bunch of intimidate mons. At the same time, you could be at a big advantage as well if let's say all of your opponents like big threats are all like set up physical sweepers. So I don't know. I think I don't know what I think about having only up to two mons with the same ability on a team, if there is a limit to that. So far, it seems like there is a limit just from what I've seen. Um, but then, of course, you could have like three different weather abilities, so that wouldn't count as the same ability at that point. It's just having like all of this, like this really strange team, basically, at that point. But I don't think it's like necessarily making it a better team. Of course, you can think of some small scenarios where it is better, but again, like these aren't really broken. Maybe I should just delete these and stop looking for them. But then again, it is something to look for just in general because we want as much knowledge in general that we can gather about the opponent's team. So if there is, in fact, some random clause that stipulates that your opponent can only have up to two of this and that, then yeah, you definitely want to know about it. So that is what I am going to find out. Um, yeah, anyway, the next one is only up to four mons of the same item. So on one team, it was crazy. I saw four leftovers. So that's actually like four healing items. So, because like black sludge, like leftovers, citrus berry, like your team can get pretty bulky like out of nowhere like if you have all of these like stally leftovers mons, right? It's almost like having two pokemon at that point because like your HP is like doubled overall if on your team over the number of turns that you accumulate all these leftover recoveries and other recoveries. But yeah, I guess like at the same time it's really not broken though. Like I feel to have like multiple of the same item like on your squad. So maybe there isn't really a stipulation because I think I even wrote initially only up to two mons of the same item, and then I changed it to three mons, and now I saw three mons with the same item, so then I changed it up to four mons of the same item. But yeah, the more I think about it, it's like it's not really broken having a bunch of mons with the same item. I feel like it's more broken just having really good mons or just a team that is really good against your opponent's team in general. Um, just really good matchups with the moves, items, and because like sometimes you still get them on, you can still just get them on that after like one move, one setup move, it can just still easily sweep an entire team. But that's what they try to mitigate by putting all of these conditions in where it makes it just less likely that that will happen. So it'll be a more skillful and slower, I suppose, game state at that point than just set up and sweep the entire team, which I agree with. I mean, I agree with just making it, both fun, but also so that, you want the game to be fun, but you also want it so that the better player will have, a higher chance of winning on average. you don't want to completely random because then there's like no skill involved basically. And then at that point, why not just play whatever? Um, why not just like flip a coin and that's the only game you play, right? So then I saw three life orbs as well. So there are different types of items. There's like offensive items and like healing items. So I was wondering if there was like some difference between that. But from what I see, so far that doesn't seem to be the case. Like I saw four leftovers, and then I saw three life orb, and then I saw the other thing I was looking for was up to three choice items. So, in fact, I think it was only like two. I had it at two, and then I saw like three, so then I bumped it up to three because I saw two choice bands and one choice specs on a team. I feel like that could be good, it could be bad, it just depends. Like if those banded or specs mons have like the U turn or the volt switch, and then, you know, it's just easy for the opponent to set up once they realize that you do have a banded mon or you have a specs mon or a scarf mon, then they kind of get like free setup, or they can just predict you to have to Dynamax, so they can take advantage of these choice items in a lot of ways. So that's why I think it's oftentimes like sometimes it's like not. I don't know how good or bad it is to have choice items. It really just depends because they can help you to just break through teams. Like let's say they switch into their unaware mon, but they didn't know you were banded, so you can actually just easily two shot them. So that's why a band can actually be really good to like break through teams. But at the same time, maybe you lose because you have a band because then they just set up on you. Um, because they know you're locked into a certain move. So yeah, apparently there isn't a limitation though that you can only have up to two choice items. But I don't know what the upper limit is. Maybe you could even have a full team of choice items. I don't know yet at this point. But so far, this data is what I have gathered. And then only up to two mons with Airstream. This seems true so far. I've only seen up to two on a team so far. Like you can't have three mons. I think that makes a lot of sense because Airstream, Max Airstream is arguably the best Dynamax move you can go for because it just boosts your speed. Um, and then, like on Mons that have no way of boosting their speed too, they can just boost their speed, and now all of a sudden they can just threaten, like to do stuff that, like the initial move set was made for a reason. The initial move set was for that Mon was probably made without the thought of of it getting a speed boost in any way because let's say this move set would be just like broken if this mon ever actually got fast, right? Like if it was like a swords dance set that was meant to be slow, so it can like break through almost any mon, but it gets taken out at the same time. Like let's say it has like really good defenses and it's really strong. Its only downside is that it's slow. Like it can set up an SD and it could probably easily sweep like any team, except that it's just like slower. It only has like average speed or slightly under average speed. But let's say with like one airstream, yeah, now it can just easily sweep any team as long as because now it probably does actually outspeed likely outspeed like every mon on the opponent's team. Doesn't have to be the case, but it gets super fast at that point, and now it can just easily be super good. And even disregarding that case, there's just so many cases where just airstream just wins like anyway because you can just like Dynamax, you easily get like after a nasty. Usually, what happens is you get like nasty plot setup or like bulk up setup, and then you just get off like one or even two airstreams, and now you outspeed the entire opposing team. What it also means is you get two hits off on their Dynamax, and then they only get like one hit off. So basically, let's say they're even faster than you initially, but you just get off two hits, and before they can take you out in two hits, you take them out in two hits because you get the airstream hit off when you're slower, but then you're faster now, so you get another airstream off. And then not only do you take them out, but you probably just outspeed their entire team, which is really good for which has like so many other good uses. Like Togekiss can now just like flinch out their entire team really easily, and it probably only needs like one flinch on every mon to actually KO it after like one nasty plot into airstream. Or like your other flying types can then just like start roost stalling, like toxic roost stalling entire opposing teams because now they outspeed everything on the opponent's team. Like a Mandibuzz or a Lugia would be the example there. Um, so yeah, Airstream I think is like extremely broken. So I think it makes sense that you can only have up to two, and I'm pretty sure that is the case from what everything I've seen. I've seen like 20 teams or so far, and that's been the case so far. So number of leads with sash times the probability for the sash was the last thing I looked at. So far I only saw like four mons that could potentially even have sash in my games. So the first did not have it, second did not, but then the third and fourth did have it. Even though the probability for Sash in general, it's saying here is like 9%, and then for that mon, it's like 12%, and then for this, 14%, and here it's 15%. So I think the takeaway from this is that, well, for one, the Sash didn't come on the mon that had the mons that had the lower probabilities of having it. So I think that's maybe just a probability thing, but we did get the Sash on the mons that had the higher probabilities of having the Sash on them. So one guess could be that for all these items, if it's the lead mon, it maybe assigns an equal probability of having all of these. So you have one, two, three, four, five. So probability of sash would maybe be like 20%. The probability is like 1 in 6. So that's like 16%. The probability that your mon is even going to be the lead mon is a 1 in 6 chance, right? On a team. So then that's like 16, 17%. So that's just only the lead mon can actually have a sash on a team, besides Alakazam, which can have the sash counter set only because it works with the moves on the set. But every other single mon in the game will only be sash. Actually, maybe Shedinja is like the one other mon I am not entirely certain about. Just because, of course, it makes sense to have a sash on a Shedinja because it only has 1 HP. So again, it just works with its like ability slash set. Um, but yeah, other than that, it's like the only time you'll ever see Sash is on a lead mon. Like a mon that's a non-lead mon can never have Sash. Besides the two cases I mentioned. So given that, that's why this probability is most likely just super low here. Um, and obviously, this is incorrect. If it's a non-lead, it should just be 0% here. And this is also incorrect if it is lead because it's actually higher than the 9%. So that's why I think you just have to like somewhat disregard this number, except for the basically the math statistic analysis that I'm trying to do right now. I actually do want to look at this number. So so far just two months that don't have it, 2 months that do have it in the lead slot specifically. So far, I guess the takeaway is maybe it's something like a 50% chance that the Mon will be Sash if they can have Sash on the set, um, if they are the lead. So far, I have to definitely take more statistics on that. But it also seems like maybe, if they have a lower chance of having Sash in general, if you see that, and I think that's maybe due to them having so many other possible items, right? Because here they only have like two possible items. So you see the Sash is. So this is. Yeah, in fact, you see on the Mon that only can have. Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, they're both like around the same. That's like 14 and like 12%. Basically, that's like pretty similar, roughly. I'm actually like somewhat surprised that it's not even like closer to the exact same number. I would have expected it to be like exactly almost the exact same number, like 14.6% for both of these. But maybe it's because there aren't actually enough games in general, because you'd probably have to play, hundreds of thousands of games to actually generate Lucario and Boltons in the lead, and to have enough samples that would actually generate, the Sash and everything. So I guess that sort of makes sense that they aren't just exactly the same value. But then we have like Shedinja, which is heavy duty boots and sash. So that's only like one other item that it can possibly have. and yet we still have a really low, well, like I said, like a 1 in 6 chance is like, that's like 16%. So the odds of you getting Shedinja lead are also just like really low. So actually, I think that means, so this is a bit less than the 1 in 16 that you would expect. That's a bit less than 16%. So what that sort of tells me, let's see, like what is this? This actual number is 12%. So that's not like it's not like half of 16. Half of 16 would be like 8. So that tells me that maybe if this is lead Shedinja, then the probability of Sash is maybe, well, actually Shedinja is a weird mon too, because like it can have, like Sash actually makes sense on Shedinja because it's again 1 HP. So that's maybe like one of the worst case examples to look at. But let's say just hypothetically, yeah, because it's not like 16 or 8, it's like sort of right in the middle of those. In fact, it's actually 16.6%, and then it would be like slightly over 8%. So this is sort of like right in the middle of those. So I think if it was like 50% of the time the lead would have Sash, though, then it would be like 8%. So I think maybe lead being Sash is, the algorithm is a bit different than that. It's actually a bit more likely than 50% of being Sash at that point. And I don't know if that would be true for every mon, just like in general, but that would be like sort of the speculation or the hypothesis to test. Anyway, for the pincer, we have the Sash, which is coming in at 9%. And that kind of makes sense because it can have so many other possible items. So that's why it's actually like the lowest percent, I think, of having the Sash. So that's actually another reason why I think it isn't just like 50% or like a set number like that for it having like Sash in the lead. Well, actually, maybe it could be because. Mm, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one because I have to think about that 16%, the 1 in 6 chance that it's even the lead in the first place. And then half of that is actually like around 9%. So maybe that actually aligns with that. Um, so maybe it is like a 50% chance. I think overall the statistics though are showing so far that yeah, if it can have a sash, if it is lead and it can have a sash, then it is probably like 50% likely or somewhere around there that it does actually have a sash. So far, those are all of the takeaways that I have determined up to this point, and I'm going to make another video again at some point.